something happens between the age of like 3 and the age of 30, where we go from being very open about our health to others and to ourselves, to being very closed about our health to others and to ourselves. And if you are one of those people, my advice would be, you're not the problem.
Good morning and welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and this is the podcast dedicating to recalibrating your health every day. My goal is to help you wake up each day energized by addressing root causes and giving you new approaches to preventive health. The more we know about integrative health, the more empowered we are in building the vibrant health we want. Welcome to the Fusionary Health podcast. I have a special guest in store for you today, Andrew Lacy, the founder of Prenuvo. And this is a company that you may not have heard of, but I'm quite certain you're going to hear about it in this upcoming year because they are making a splash. They are getting out there and definitely showing us an entirely new way to look at our health, diagnosing, and really getting under the hood of what's going on in our bodies. And then for some of us, getting the peace of mind that we want. So thank you, Andrew, for coming on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Dr. Gupta.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And will you share with us your story, your background of why you created Prenuvo and what Prenuvo is for my audience?
Well, it's so funny that you talk about getting under the hood because it's literally part of my story. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I have done what most entrepreneurs do, which is been reasonably abusive of my body for many years. I didn't sleep enough. I was very stressed. I didn't eat much. I didn't exercise as much as I should. All because I was working so hard to build a better future. I remember at one point looking up in the mirror and asking myself, well, how do I know I'm going to be around for that future? And funnily enough, I had just taken my car in for a service at a new service shop. Okay. And they had this, they sent me a 30-page report that went through, component by component, what they were seeing, what was okay, where was their oil leaking, how was the way that I was driving the car impacting the brake pads. And
wow.
I mean, it was just very detailed. And I just had this out-of-body moment where I sort of said, well, why on earth do I know more about sort of the state of health of my car, which if it breaks down, I can buy a new one,
right?
Then I know about the state of health of my body, which unfortunately, I don't think anyone's figured out how to put a brain inside a new body. So we're sort of stuck with the one that we have. We better look after it.
True. Very true. Very true. And then, so what led that? What happened after that?
So I went on a search for someone who could give me answers, and I discovered a clinic that was doing these whole body scans, a precursor to what we do at Prenuvo. And I went there. Got to be honest, I was pretty nervous going. I'm like, okay, now I get to see the accumulation of all of the sort of like harm I'd done to my body. And interestingly, they told me there was nothing life-threatening going on inside.
Nice.
I was in generally good health. Yeah. And I remember feeling this incredible peace of mind. And it really stuck with me. And something, it really was part of why I wanted to bring these scans to different parts of America so that other people can feel that same sort of control and clarity and peace of mind around one's health.
Absolutely. And that was my experience. So I did the scan, and it's interesting because the timing of that scan was I had just done a lot of hormone optimization, got thyroid health on board, progesterone, testosterone. I was feeling amazing. But I had a weird symptom come up where all of a sudden I was getting a haircut, and they were like, do you know you have like a weird hair spot missing? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're talking about the back of my head. I can't see it. And so then someone took a photo for me, a dermatologist, and showed me these big spots of hair that were missing. And I thought, oh my God, please tell me that's not cancer. Please tell me that's not mole? Like, what is the big thing it could be? That's an unusual symptom. And about 2 weeks later, I was having the scan. So I walked into Prenuvo, which, by the way, feels like the most luxurious med spa. Everyone was so nice. I was like, can I hang out here all day? This is just awesome. And when I got the scan, I was just so worried in my body. I was like, I'm not trying to generate disease, but please, God, don't let it be some horrific thing, because like you, I'm an entrepreneur. I push the boundaries of everything I can physically do to create the future that I see for the world. And so when all of a sudden I got the scan results back, they came back totally clean. And we'll go over what mine said, but peace of mind, I think, is priceless. And oftentimes with the family histories we have and all the things we're learning about health, people are really scared about what's happening. They feel like they don't have enough imaging or data on their bodies. And so will you talk a little bit about the ethos of why Prenuvo as a full body MRI is such a great tool to add on to Western medicine and really functional medicine, concierge medicine, all the different specialties that we go to for our health?
Yeah, I mean, really the goal is to sort of equalize some of the systemic and psychological barriers to getting to good health. And so the scan really is an opportunity to say, hey, of course we care about what symptoms you feel, but we're not doing this test or not doing this test based on how you feel the state of your health is, how your doctor feels the state of your health is. We do this, and the goal is to really just, give you a complete inventory about what's going on under the skin. And for some people, that's sort of like very profound. I mean, there are folks that are, I'm Australian, Australians are known for their stoicism. If we're feeling sick, we ignore it. We sort of expect it's going to go away. And I have relatives that have done that right until they got diagnosed with terminal cancer or passed away from something. And so we sort of take our own brains out of the equation. And then there are a lot of folks that interact with the healthcare system, particularly women and minorities, where their health symptoms are often marginalized.
True.
And so it sort of takes the physician out of the equation to some extent. And we just, for folks that do these scans, it provides them with a unique insight to follow their health as we age, which is sort of, for me, I think the most profoundly interesting part of annual screening.
Sure. I mean, a lot of people who I hang out with are classic Western MDs. And so I couldn't tell anyone what I did because I knew they'd be like, you did what? You got in an MRI machine for an hour to see what? If it's not called for, why would you do that? And I remember when I heard you speak, you said, look, when we do this scan, what's fascinating is, and this is what sold me on the idea, you said, when someone has something that's really unusual, normally you would say, oh, that's just not anything of note. We have no idea what that is. It's benign. It's fine. But because your team is made up of such phenomenal practitioners, the best of the best around the country from different universities, they'll comment on the group text like, hey, actually, I have seen that in the literature, but we've only seen 6 cases. And so this is actually what that is. I know what it is. And that can actually further science if we see. So will you explain that? Because that to me was phenomenal.
Well, I think that the sort of challenge for the business that we do, and it's a challenge for consumers and it's a challenge for physicians, is that you can think of whole body screening as sort of a test, whereas really what it is a clinical practice. And so, a test, think about like a COVID test. I mean, you go to the pharmacy, there's like 3 different brands. You don't really know what the difference is. There probably isn't one. They're more or less the same. With whole body, that's not the case. The hardware that you use, the screening protocols, these are the images that you take, the radiologist training that goes into like being able to read these reports, all of these things really impact the overall medical accuracy of the scan. And so you can imagine physicians that are skeptical about these. Sometimes that skepticism is driven by some experience they had with whole body screening 20 years ago in some completely different context. And so we work really hard to educate physicians on, just how we're different. And I got to be honest, like, I come from Silicon Valley, so originally, it's you're surrounded by these transformative companies.
Sure.
And I remember when the first Uber launched, when Uber first launched and people go around saying, hey, there's this company that will like drive you around rather than have to drive yourself around. Everyone was like, this is the stupidest idea ever. Or Airbnb, you can stay inside someone else's house that you don't know versus a hotel. Everyone's like, that's the stupidest idea ever.
Right.
And you sort of have to experience it to really understand how profoundly transformative it is. And I think this scan is also something similar. A lot of doctors are skeptical on the outside, but once we get them in and really take them through it, it's sort of transformative for their own understanding of just how impactful these scans can be.
Right. And when I talked to you about it, my first question was, what's the quality of the MRI machine? Because I've had different MRIs for different body parts for different reasons. And I remember once I went for one at some place down the road. And when I took that scan into the surgeon, he said, oh, that's garbage. I'm not going to be using that. And I thought, I could have done any scan. So you could have operated knowing exactly where in my body that fibroid was exactly. And you're telling me the scan was garbage. So since then, I really do pay attention to quality and go to MRI centers that are actually focused on quality. And so when people say, I don't understand how this will scan the whole body, what is it giving detail about? Will you explain that?
Well, and just sort of a side note on that. So most imaging is done in outpatient imaging facilities.
Correct.
And outpatient imaging facilities, you're not the customer. The insurance company is the customer. And so their goal is throughput. Their goal is not necessarily high quality imaging. Now, some of those centers are also doing whole body imaging. So you might say, well, maybe they're just going to think about that imaging in a different way. But you sort of can't because, if you're going to take up some time on that machine away from like an insurance paid scan, you have to think about it the same way as if you were doing an insurance paid scan. It's all about throughput and how quickly I can get people through those machines.
Sure.
And again, whole body being more of a clinical practice, there are whole lots of choices that you can make to speed up these scans. I mean, you could, in theory, do a whole body scan in 10 minutes.
Wow.
The reality is it just won't necessarily be, it's not going to have anywhere near the same medical accuracy as the scans that we do at Prenuvo. So it's just unfortunately really hard to sort of pass through all this, as a physician and certainly as a consumer. So that's a little bit the challenge. Anyhow, back to your question.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to these scans and the quality, what is the intention and the focus? I had the experience and I know what my scan said, but for a listener who's like, you want to do what to me? Put me in a machine for how long? What will they find at the end? And how have you built? Because to me, it looks very robust. The question and answer, the question series, the intake form was so long, but it wanted to know every inch of what could possibly be a concern to you. And so I said, acute hair loss, shockingly, I don't know where that came from. Yes, I've had a fibroid surgery. I had these different things happen in my lifetime. And so afterwards, based on that scan, the doctor who sat down with me had so much data on correlating different things and saying, actually, yes, your concern here is tied to this point of the image. And so will you share what are those goals that the company has to show the consumer what is going on underneath the hood?
Well, let's sort of break it down. Let's talk about what the process is and what the consumer gets out of it. So we operate these facilities around the US. There are 17 or 18 of them, and we're opening more. Each of these facilities is built, not to be honest, I mean, I appreciate your kind words that it felt like a great med spa. I mean, we didn't set out with a goal of creating a med spa because really creating a med spa in and of itself does not improve the quality of the product, right? However, what we found was that a lot of people's anxiety is triggered by sort of interfacing with the medical system. So we wanted to create a space that didn't feel like a medical space. It felt like something where you could be relaxed and comfortable. We follow that through into the scan itself. So rather than just lie in a really tight MRI, our MRIs are bigger. And the MRIs have video inside. So you can watch, streaming television or listen to music or meditate or do whatever you want to help you sort of get through that process. And we find that's been really, really helpful for patients. We're not rushed. Our goal is to collect great images. If you move during the scan, we take a little extra time to do it better. If you have some anxiety or concerns, we're there to really help people through the scan itself. So it's not about throughput. It's about sort of quality of the product that we provide. And And then once you're done, those scans go to our radiologists. They're all board certified, and they do a reading organ by organ. One radiologist sort of like runs point. And then depending on what they see, they might bring in other radiologists. And patients then get a detailed report and an app where they can sort of navigate through organ by organ, condition by condition, and basically go through what we find and what we believe you should do as a result of those findings. And those images are available to patients. They don't have to like send in a fax request to some central image repository. You can share them directly with your providers. So the goal is to really, you're the owner of this, of your own results, and we want to empower you to really take control.
Absolutely. And I loved that. And as the consumer, I want my data. It's mine. I got that data on my body. So why shouldn't I have all of it at my fingertips? And so when I saw that report, I was like, wow, this is actually really pulling a lot of pieces together. You're right. I forgot I had that disc issue back there in my back. I forgot about it. I forgot that I formed fibroids and another one could have formed. And so to me, it was just such a beautiful way to say, okay, here's where you are now. Here's your snapshot in your mid 40s. Now you have a baseline, and that baseline can be very powerful. So every couple of years, if you go do this and something changes, you have that data point on yourself. And so
the funny thing is, I'm laughing because, these scans look at everything.
Yeah.
Everything. For example, if you're a man, everything.
Sure.
And it's crazy the stories I hear from people saying, hey, I'm like, how'd you hear about it? So, like my friend, I was at dinner with this friend of mine and he passed around his images and his report around the entire dinner table.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is like, think about when's the last time you like pulled out like a blood test or, and you like pass it around to your friends. This is obviously, just such an indication of how profound people are finding this, that they're sort of like willing to share things that otherwise they might think quite private.
Right.
Because, they want to help other people understand just how different it is. I think it's like really heartwarming, to be honest.
I think so too. I think at this day and age, and this is a thought I had today, we are in the wild, wild west of trying to understand our own health. We almost all have to become doctors of our own health. I am a practitioner and I'm still always on the path studying and understanding and trying every diagnostic tool on myself to understand, how am I going to use this with others? How am I going to recommend this? Which doctors on earth need to know this? Because this is how they're going to help their patients. And so we each have to have that knowledge and self-knowledge. And so this tool to me was so fascinating. I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner. I teach ancient medicine. So this is kind of the opposite of ancient medicine. It's such a modern future tool. But what I thought about was, wow, what a beautiful fusion. The more we bring functional medicine and diagnostic tools into ancient wisdom and fuse them, you take the knowledge, bring the ancient tools on board, and here you've solved a lot of issues in the body.
Well, I do think it changes, though, a bit the nature of the relationship. And I think this is a good thing. I'm a former lawyer, so I would say like the one thing that lawyers and doctors have in common is that they think that their practice is somehow mystical and sort of like, no one can understand it except for them. And I think, there's new tools, the ChatGPTs and AI and all this sort of stuff is like really equipping patients with a lot more knowledge than they might have had like 10 or 20 years ago.
True.
Not all of it is accurate, but, that definitely makes them a lot more informed. And so in that context of that, I think the role of practitioner is changing. It's sort of more like practitioner coach these days, because, a patient will come into a meeting, with a lot more knowledge about what's going on and what they think they should do. And but they still need help.
True.
So I think gone are the days, unfortunately, with these scans where you get all the credit for like diagnosing the problem. Now, I think you need to, for medical practitioners, it's more about like, you get the credit for like helping me improve health outcomes. And isn't that like a better objective?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so where do you see the future going with Prenuvo?
So we're continuing to expand sort of the range of screening that we do. We have right now a torso cancer scan that's just under $1,000 that screens for cancer in the torso, which is where something like 85% of all the cancers originate.
Wow.
we have a comprehensive exam, which is the exam that you did, where we look from head to ankles, every organ. We're looking for things that could kill you. We're looking for sort of underlying early disease for conditions that are typically only diagnosed when they're chronic.
Right.
And now we just launched 2 weeks ago a new scan called Enhance that adds 3 things. First, it adds a new FDA-cleared body composition analysis. So we look inside and we measure the size of every organ. We measure all of the fats in the body, so liver fat, visceral fat, subcutaneous fat, and we measure all of the many of the muscles. So we can start to give you metrics that you can track 1 year to the next.
Nice.
To understand how your health is evolving. That's the first thing. The second thing is an advanced neurological examination. So we add additional sequences in the brain to really help us understand sort of micro damage and peel back the clock on potential brain volume loss. So look at perfusion in the brain, understand how blood is flowing, because if blood isn't flowing optimally to a region of the brain, eventually you get brain volume loss.
True.
And then the last thing is we're adding some blood. So this is the first time we move outside of imaging to do blood testing. And the main reason we're doing that is because there are some conditions that you really need blood to diagnose. And a good example of this is leukemia.
Sure.
Where we see it late, we don't see it early on imaging. Okay. And then secondly, blood can just be really helpful in differential diagnoses when we look at something, let's say we might see fatty liver, it's helpful to know that you have normal liver function test scores.
Right.
So we know that while there is fat here, it's not yet damaging the liver. And the answer might be quite different if we see liver fat and those LFT scores look elevated. That means the liver is being stressed by sort of this condition that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And so what are some stories you can share that stand out to you around client outcomes where, I can only imagine that when you talk about cancer screening and the level of cancer history that people have in their family histories, that people are able to detect much early. And one thing that concerns me is we know 1 in 2, 1 in 3 people are going to have cancer. So the return on investment of catching that early can be pretty profound, because from what I see when people go through their cancer journeys, it can be very expensive, very involved, and then very damaging to the body when we talk about some of their tools. And so what are some of those stories that you have around who this helped the most? Hi, I'm Dr. Shivani Gupta, and I created Fusionary Formulas because I believe everyone deserves a natural way to support their body's health. If you struggle with joint discomfort or stiffness, our turmeric gold delivers powerful curcumin in a form your body can truly absorb. It's science-backed with the highest quality ingredients and designed to support your body's natural inflammatory response. Take the next step in your health and wellness journey today. Visit fusionaryformulas.com and use code Fusionary Health for 15% off. Fusionary Formulas, ancient wisdom, modern science, maximum impact.
Well, I think more broadly, it's just worth reflecting a little bit on, cancer is this sort of uncontrolled proliferation of cells. And for a cancer to start growing and become metastatic, it sort of has to unlock a few keys. Yeah. It has to turn off some of the cellular repair machinery. It needs to find a way to evade the immune system. And one of the very last keys is the ability to metastasize.
Sure.
And every cancer takes a certain period of time to go through those various different locks. Yeah. And what we're finding with Prenuvo is the overwhelming majority of cancers we're finding are localized to the organ of origin, so stage 1.
Amazing.
And that reflects this idea that, it takes some time for a cancer can be growing inside an organ, but still have not figured out for several years, how to evade other parts of the body.
Sure.
And so that's the most heartwarming thing. Of course, it's scary to be diagnosed with cancer, but it's largely scary. Some part of that is because cancer is typically only caught late in the reactive healthcare system.
Sure.
When you catch it early, it's much less a life-changing event and more, an outpatient procedure that you don't need to tell everyone about. And so that's been the most profound difference. We've found more pancreatic cancers at stage 1 that are operable than most people expect. And, that's typically a terminal diagnosis when it happens. We find ovarian cancer localized to the ovaries. That's typically a terminal diagnosis when it's found. So, there's tons of as it relates to cancer. We've found patients that have aneurysms that are like large and actionable, and every so often we have to send them to the hospital straight away. And then beyond that, we find interesting. We're all unique on the inside. It's crazy that you can become like middle-aged and like never actually have any reason to like look inside. And so we might find someone like you, Dr. Gupta, who comes in and like, oh, by the way, you've only got one kidney.
That would be
and you didn't realize,
Wow.
And you go back in time and say, well, what did you do when you were a teenager? Oh, well, like I did this martial arts thing. Oh, did you ever get any like punches to the abdomen? Yeah. Okay. Well, probably at some point when you were a teenager, like you had a kidney that atrophied and died, and the other one grew to take over, and you didn't know. So, but maybe you want to be a little bit more careful about things that might affect your kidney, given you only got one of them now.
Right. Good warning.
So, yeah, we found people where their organs are completely reversed in their bodies. So not all of it is like medically actionable immediately. Some of it is really helpful information for how you might want to live your life. Even these chronic conditions like fatty liver. We have people that are, let's call it, overweight and have fatty liver. And you might say to me, Andrew, well, you're not really giving me any unique insight there. I sort of would have expected that. But we're also finding athletes that like carb load, because they're burning so many calories. They're eating pasta nonstop, and they're just trying to like get that energy back. And it's actually causing them, it's loading fat in their liver. Some of them even are pre-diabetic. And these are the fittest people in the world if you looked at them.
Wow.
So what I love about it is it's like unique insights, because a typical, like annual physical is, you go in and they don't tell you anything that you don't already know.
Oh, I've been to primary care and been so disappointed. I stopped going a long time ago because I walked in with a list of 15 items. I said, I think these 15 things are wrong. And they'd look at basic blood work, do an EKG, and be like, you are fine. And I was like, oh yeah, we need a different level of detailed care for someone like me. I'm not living with that 5-minute answer on who I am. And then that's good enough for a year of knowledge on me.
And then they ask the question, well, why is no one getting annual physicals? Well, no one's getting annual physicals, like, because people are smart. They realize that it's kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. I wish that the level of detailed healthcare that we need in this moment was covered by insurance. I really do. I think it would be great, because women come to me all the time. They're like, okay, great. I want to do what you're doing. How do I get it covered? And I tell them, look, I have doctors who spend hours with me, NPs who are talking to me every week as we're working on everything. It's an investment. But I literally looked at my life in the last few years and said, I'm assigning my life budget towards health. I'm going to travel less. I'm going to shop less. I'm going to do a lot of things less, because physical things don't matter to me, but my health being amazing gives me all the energy I need and want to build my dreams. And so your scan was so fascinating to me. And I wanted to share real quick, because I think we all do get excited about our results, because your imaging is so good and it's so detailed. So for those on YouTube, if you're listening on audio, you can also just jump into YouTube to see this, but I'll share my screen real quick. That's my brain. And one small circle shows a white spot. And so a doctor the doctor who met with me from your team, who took the time to review this with me, said, I know that looks like nothing. Looks like nothing. No one would say anything about this if they saw this anywhere else. But what I want to tell you is this is the beginning of future dementia if this became 20 spots 10, 20 years from now. So this is just a warning shot really early on. And based on all the blood work and all the family history you told me, you have high cholesterol, whole family has major heart disease and diabetes. This could be vascular damage. And so I found that so fascinating. And I was like, thank you, because I was already obsessing about brain health, gut health, all those things. But it made me take it very much more seriously. I was like, okay, brain health is a focus. You need to focus on cholesterol. I know you're perimenopausal in a woman and the number's going to rise, but let's imagine the damage of that. So let's really focus on the project. And so to me, I took it as a preventive tool. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it also highlights something else, which I'm sure you would appreciate. Western medicine looks at our bodies as like a big sack that has a collection of organs inside. And I think these scans sort of enable us to actually really look at our bodies as a system, right? Which is a much more sort of Eastern medicine way of looking at what's going on.
True.
And, it's crazy to think that, we can get some insight maybe into what's going on with your cardiovascular system by looking at your brain.
Correct.
But, you have these very tiny capillaries up there. And if there's if someone has atherosclerotic disease, we'll start to see blockages up there. So it is, everything is connected. That's what we're finding. And we can learn a lot about your dementia risk by looking at your visceral fat.
Correct.
Or we can learn a lot about whether your heart is pumping well by looking at your lower extremities, your legs.
Right.
So it's you can start to construct this very beautiful picture that's like very complete.
Right.
Based on just taking all these images in one sitting and not focusing on one organ.
Absolutely. And that interconnectedness is the key, because oftentimes we just break the body into parts. I had this issue a few years ago when I had a fibroid. The doctors just said, get a hysterectomy. Why do you care? And I got so angry because I said, really,
Wow.
You're going to take away every unnecessary organ, take my gallbladder. I obviously don't need 2 kidneys. Why do I still have tonsils? Breasts are unnecessary. I'm done breastfeeding. Just take it all. And I just
Don't need a spleen.
everything unnecessary you should just cut out. Guys, come on. And so this scan was so beautiful because it said, hey, you actually did form another fibroid in your uterus. And so now I have a warning shot on, okay, how are you going to manage that? Let's talk about progesterone. Let's talk about hormone therapy. Let's talk about where this is coming from and where we can focus on hormone health. And so I really took it as a beautiful preventive tool. And when I met with your team, they also said, hey, we've actually never seen someone in their 40s without inflammation in their joints in the lower extremities. You're unusual. And I said, I make a turmeric supplement. So thank you. You just validated how effective turmeric is for inflammation. And so we had a lot of fun talking about the fact that my scan came out really healthy. I got 1 or 2 things to focus on. But those 2 things to focus on will change the trajectory of my life. Because if I focus on those and my brain health, all of a sudden, what does that look like 20 years from now? Shivani's got no dementia, neurocognitive disease, because she learned 44 what to do.
Yeah, no, it's such a great story. Inflammation is a big one for us and for me personally. And what's kind of cool is this, one of the sequences that we take is called diffusion. We actually use it to measure hardness inside the body.
Okay.
And it's super helpful for cancer because how they tell women, feel your breast for lumps. Doesn't mean every lump is a cancer, but every cancer is a lump. It's like all these densely packed cells growing fast, so it's more tightly packed than the rest of the tissue. So that's why it sort of presents as like a harder spot. And we can use this sequence to like find that. The other thing that's harder though is inflammation. If you've ever sort of like, I don't know, had an inflamed finger or something and you feel the skin, it feels harder than the surrounding skin.
Sure.
And so when we image patients, we can actually kind of like look at, if we see, for example, inflammation in joints, for example, RA, if we see inflammation in the colon, the inflammation in the colon, if it's systemic, presents so beautifully. We have this image sequence and you can see like the outline of the colon, and that's all inflammation. And these might be patients that have absolutely no idea.
Sure.
Because that's probably a disease process that has played out over like 20 years.
Right.
And so from one day to the next, like the change is so minor, you don't notice it as a human.
Right.
But you just wait, you wake up 20 years later, going to the bathroom 4 or 5 times a day, and you don't remember what it used to be like when you're sort of 20 and you only had to go once.
Right. Well, what else I love that story and I love that explanation in terms of the science of what you're seeing in humans. I think it'll be interesting to see the data that you find on, okay, these diseases are up. These are the changes in humans. Can you see microplastics? Like, what do you see your scan being able to see and collect over time? Because it'll be fun to see what the trends are.
Yeah, I wish we could see microplastics. We cannot. Maybe one day. I feel like we've just sort of scratching the surface on what you can do with MRI machines, which is sort of the underlying technology that we use.
Right.
And it's a technology that's been around for 30 years. So you might think there's not much innovation left. But think of smartphones. They were around for 20 years, mobile phones, before, Apple came out with something crazy. And now it's hard to imagine how it used to be.
Right.
So I think this is the same is true with MRIs. There's tremendous innovation. There are people working on sequences that can screen for like any other, sodium activity or potassium activity in the brain, it's just a lot of unexplored areas here.
Nice.
And no one really figuring out how to bring it to market. So I'm hopeful in the coming years, we're going to continue to innovate and bring new diagnostics using these incredible machines to patients in our clinics.
Amazing. Amazing. And can you name some of those major cities that you have these in, or any new cities that are coming online?
If it's a big metropolitan area, you probably have a clinic already. And then on our website at prenuvo.com/locations, you'll see a list of the other locations where we're soon to open. If you are unable to travel and want to wait, there's wait lists there. And we contact those wait lists when we just open, so we get those folks in first.
Nice.
And then if you have any international listeners, we're actually opening in my home city where I grew up, Melbourne, Australia, in a couple of months.
Amazing.
So that my parents can get scans. And we're going to be opening in London also towards the middle of the year. So this 2025, 2026, we'll start to move internationally too.
Amazing. Amazing. And I love that with the scan, you're moving into, I was going to call it neurocognitive, but into the brain more, because the more we see and can understand what's happening, the better off we are. I know so many people who their father had a stroke, or, different people are having a lot of catastrophic health issues. Alzheimer's is on the rise. And so the earlier we can kind of scan and understand what's happening in the brain, that neuroinflammation and these issues, the sooner we can kind of diagnose. So do you see this becoming that frontline tool that people and practitioners can use, so that once you've done a lot of the work? The way I looked at it was, I go to functional medicine. We do a lot of testing. We do stool testing, mold testing, heavy metal testing, food intolerance testing. We want to know all those types of things. And we do big blood work. That's great. But still, physically, sometimes there are things going on. And if you didn't see this imagery, you wouldn't understand the physical piece, like you said, that you can correlate to all that data. And so it just seems to me like that perfect last step. Maybe for some it's first step, but that final step on that health journey to say, you know what, that's everything. I'm good. I'm going to maintain this lifestyle now for a couple of years. And then when it's time to rescan and recheck everything and make sure we're still good, then I have it there. So how do you see it fitting into the puzzle of people's health plans?
Well, I can explain sort of how it does for me, which is, I went from being, now I haven't profoundly changed my life in the sense that I'm not, devoting 10 hours a day to my health. But like these scans and the other checkups I do are just so helpful to give me peace of mind to not worry. There was always this voice on my shoulder, this little guy saying, hey, maybe something's going on to the skin. You're not sleeping enough. What's that feeling? How come you keep having too many headaches? So on and so forth. And just to quieten that voice has enabled me to focus on other parts of my life.
True. And
just generally be a happier person. Right. And so the goal for me is I want to keep doing these and other tests every year, because this is it's a beautiful state to be in.
Yeah.
And I know that if I skip, or if I take, if I miss my appointment, all of those old bad habits will kick in. The stoic Australian, I'm not going to, I'm sure there's nothing wrong with me. It doesn't make any sense to go get another test. So I try and do it really religiously. And I don't know how to convince or explain people what that peace of mind feels like if they haven't done it before, but it's just really wonderful.
Yeah. It's like a full body, full nervous system relief. And what's interesting, when you're in the healthcare world, you see so much bad. As a practitioner, I see a lot of people who come in with crazy health issues that they've had for their whole lives. And I always think, wow, I'm pretty lucky with what I've been dealt. It's not that bad. And recently, a friend of mine, she's a health coach, she was diagnosed with cancer. And I just remember the day she texted me thinking, wait a minute, you walk the walk, you do everything right, you're so healthy. Outwardly, you would never see that. And so it just kind of planted that seed in my brain of, we could be doing everything. That doesn't mean we have control over what's forming inside the body. We're just trying our best. And so that's
when
where
I was,
yeah.
I have a funny anecdote on this, if
Sure.
I'm being honest. Like, I was usually a pretty good student, back at school, but like a couple times I was a guy that always asked too many why questions. I even got detention a few times for it. And I often find, like, if you really ask enough why questions, you get to the root cause of, what someone's hesitancy is. So, and this is true for consumers. A consumer might say, oh, it's too expensive, or not covered by insurance. If it was covered by insurance, I'd do it. Or what about false positives or something like, and really at the root of it is like a nervousness about learning about their own health.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest, like, I've met now hundreds of doctors. I would say that what you said is so accurate. Doctors have even more fears because they've seen more late stage disease than the average person.
Correct.
And you have to ask yourself the question, if you go to your physician and say, hey, what do you think about these scans that Prenuvo is doing? And if the doctor is like dismissive or like raised a lot of objections, it is worth asking the question, how much is this a sort of like objective opinion versus sort of like a convenient reflection of my own fears?
Right. It's true. It's true. When I was waiting for the results, I was equally excited and equally scared because it creates that anxiety of what if they find something horrible and my whole life changes? And you're right. If you're in the healthcare field, you see the worst of the worst. It's all I hear about. If I hang out with my own family, my in-laws are all physicians. Never go to a party with these people. They're like, did you see this case? I just did this. This person broke this. And you're like, what? How is the whole world full of that? But that's their experience.
And physicians they're humans. They're not sort of mystical creatures. They are psychologically affected by the reactive healthcare system, just like consumers, and even more so because of their exposure. Absolutely. So all of those fears that the average consumer might have about like learning about their health, it's going to be amplified for physicians. True. And I've talked to tons of physicians. Say, hey, like I might even recommend this for my patient, but I'm not going to do it myself. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, because they don't want the news and they don't want to know. Isn't it interesting how we are as humans? But that peace of mind piece that you said, it's invaluable. And yesterday, before I was going to interview you, I Googled, what is the negative effect of being in an MRI machine? Because anyone in the health world, we're like, don't over x-ray me. Don't over do a lot of testing. And it said nothing. There's no punishment. Obviously contrast MRI is different, but this type of MRI. So is there anything you want to say about that? Because people do worry about these things.
I mean, it's the sort of signal that an MRI gives off is something similar to AM radio.
Okay.
So
we're surrounded by radio.
We're surrounded by radio. So
we're surrounded by much worse, to be honest, between our cell phones, our printers. I think about that sometimes, our Wi-Fi signal, all the things.
So you could sleep in one of these machines if you wanted to. You could do a scan every day. It's, there's no evidence that this is problematic for your health. The contrast is.
Yeah.
There is growing evidence that this contrast that sometimes is used with MRI and CT to in the case of MRI, look to like further classify lesions.
Sure.
It's a heavy metal. So there's some evidence that accumulates in the cerebellum.
Right.
So that's a big part of the reason why we don't use that for screening.
Sure.
But so outside of contrast, and you should only be using it when you really need to, these things are totally safe.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Andrew. Is there anything we didn't cover that you wanted to share with my audience today?
No, we covered a lot. I would just encourage folks to really think about and feel okay if they're afraid. Right. I have a young child, the daughter, and if she gets a boo-boo, which happens all the time because she keeps running into things, she'll stop everyone on the street and tell them what's going on with her. Sure. If she's not feeling well, she'll tell everyone. Something happens between the age of like 3 and the age of 30 where we go from being very open about our health to others and to ourselves to being very closed about our health to others and to ourselves. And if you are one of those people, my advice would be, you're not the problem. What's happened here is you are the product. These feelings are the product of a reactive healthcare system. And my challenge would be, like, if you recognize that, you're not a victim anymore. You can take control.
Right.
And you can use these scans and other preventive tests to really learn more about your health and be an advocate for, improving your health over the course of your life. You have the means to do this.
It's funny. I did a bunch of tests on myself recently and got some answers I didn't want to know. And it was like a stool test and a mold test. And I told my closest friends about the results. And their reaction was, don't tell me about it. And why did you test yourself? Why did you want to know all that? And I said, are you kidding me right now? Do you know mold exposure, what that does to the gut and the brain?
Yeah.
What that means is the house has mold. I didn't cause that. I'm not gross. My house is beautiful and clean and stunning. But these things happen. I live in Florida. Better that my children are protected. And I got the answer now. And so it shocked me that the response was, why did you go looking for the answers? Because now you have to deal with it. And so I love that you shared that, because you're right. It comes to our own thought process around it and really digging under the hood. And truly, it's a preventive tool. You're understanding yourself better so that you can self-manage and make better decisions. It's that simple to me.
100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew, so much for coming on here. Thank you for sharing about Prenuvo. I loved my experience. I watched Bridgerton in the Prenuvo scan and had a great time watching TV, because I don't usually make the time to watch TV. And I thought it was such a fun experience. So thank you for coming on here. Everyone who's interested in Prenuvo, their website's prenuvo.com. They gave me a special code, Dr. Shivani, to share with you for $300 off your scan, which I thought was wonderful. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing in the world. To me, it is so exciting when entrepreneurs create health tools to support us. And your tool is a really, really fascinating one that I think will change millions and millions of lives.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your support, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining me for this episode. Check out our sponsor, Fusionary Formulas, the potent turmeric supplement used by doctors around the U.S. for patients with pain and inflammation. www.fusionaryformulas.com. I'm your host, Dr. Shivani Gupta. For more, visit shivanigupta.com. Subscribe to this podcast in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Click the follow button or subscribe in any of the apps that you use. That's all I've got for you on the Fusionary Health podcast this week. You have the power to transform your health and achieve vibrant health starting today.